Good morning, everyone. How's your day? Our topic for today is ecological relationship. Let us have a simple prayer before we start our lesson. Dear God, help me spend today with a smile on my face, love in my heart, joy in His grace, and my thinking cap on all day. Amen. I have some reminders. This video lesson was created just for all of you class, so you may still continue to study in your homes, despite of the restrictions brought about by the pandemic. You may watch these video lessons anytime you want, while working, doing household chores, even if you're sick. Just send a private message of you if you have some difficulties about the lesson so that I can help you. The objective of our lessons are you should be able to differentiate intraspecific from interspecific interactions, symbiotics and non-symbiotics relationship, describe the relationship between organisms in an ecosystems, and what is the importance of individual and collective actions on protecting and preserving the ecosystem. As the saying goes, no man is an island. Each of us has a responsibility not only for ourselves, families, relatives, friends, or in our fellow citizens, but also in our society, community, and environment, either living or non-living things, or what we call biotic and abiotic factors. They are important part of our habitat. We cannot live alone. An environment is composed of living and non-living things. What are the examples of living and non-living things? Okay, so we have the examples of non-living things include the rocks, the water, the weather, the climate, and natural events such as rockfalls or earthquakes. Living things are defined by a set of characteristics, including the ability to reproduce, grow, move, breathe, adapt, or respond to their environment. So the example of living things are human beings and plants, insects, mammals, mosses, animals, reptiles, and bacteria. Now, a group of organisms interacting with each other and with their non-living environment is called an ecosystem. The living organisms in an ecosystem are the biotic factors. So these include the plants and animals. On the other hand, abiotic factors such as soil, light, water, and temperature are the non-living components of an ecosystem. All ecosystems consist of three basic components. What are the three basic components? We have the autotrophs, consumers, and abiotic matter. The producers or autotrophs are the source of food, organisms that produce their own food. So we have the example, plants and algae. They do not depend on other organisms to gain energy. The consumers or heterotrophs cannot make their own food. They depend on other organisms in order to survive. So the examples are the human and the animals. Non-living environment are the abiotic factors. So we have the example, the air, currents, temperature, moisture, light, and soil. So before we proceed to our topic, I want to group yourself into three to answer the learning task number 1. Study the pictures. At least mention 2 biotic and 2 abiotic components and give their functions. I will give you 5 minutes to answer it. Time's up. Let us check your work. Okay, so number 1. Give an example of biotic. Anybody? Okay. The biotic are plants and animals. So the plants is the source of food called autotrophs, and animals are the heterotrophs, depend on other organisms to survive. What about abiotic example on this picture? Very good. Example of abiotic is soil. So what is the function of soil? The soil absorbs, hold, release, alter, and purify most of the water in terrestrial system. Soils process recycled nutrients, including carbon, so that living things can use them over and over again. Another is the, okay, very good, light. Light affects water temperature. Biological processes such as the relationship between predators and prey, and plant photosynthesis and growth. Under natural conditions, light is controlled by topography, cloudiness, vegetation cover, and seasonal patterns like less daylight in the winter. I hope everybody got the perfect score. Now, let us continue our discussion. What is population? Very good. A population is a group of organisms of the same species which interbreed and live in the same area at the same time. Now, what is habitat and niche? Okay. Habitat, place where an organism lives. It provides an organism with food and shelter. Everything which an organism does and needs within its habitat is called niche. All strategies and adaptations a species uses in its environment, how it meets its specific needs for food and shelter, how and where it survives, and where it reproduces is niche. These are the different examples of a niche. An ecological niche describes the role of an organism plays in its environment. It consists of the species habitat, the organism's activity, the period of time it is active, the resources it obtains from the environment. So we have the example in the slide. Apoqueco lives in marsh areas. It feeds on small insects and grasses. Okay, so we have the ecological relationships. Different types of organisms interact with each other in their particular habitat. Interactions may be classified into two. We have the intra-specific interactions. So it involves the relationship between organisms of the same species or population. Each species communicates with other organisms to stay in touch with the population. Many animals use chemical signals. Animals use pheromones as signals. Ants use them to track and guide their way. Honeybees touch antennae to distinguish mates from intruders. Number 2 is the interspecific interactions. Different populations interacting with each other. These interactions may be beneficial to both species. Beneficial to one species and harmful to another. Beneficial to one species but has no effect to the other or harmful to both species. Symbiotic relationships are present among organisms of different species that have close association and depend on each other for survival. There are 3 types of symbiotic relationships based on the effect on each organisms. Okay, can you give me one? Very good. Number 1 is mutualism. What is mutualism? Mutualism is a symbiotic relationship where both organisms benefit from each other. So a very common example is a bee and a flower. While the bee is able to get nectar from the flower to make its food, it also helps the flower to pollinate. Mutualisms can be defined based on the function it serves for each organism. In the mentioned example, the mutualistic relationship between the bee and the flower aids in pollination. So other functions that an organism may get from a mutualistic relationship are food acquisition, transportation, shelter, and defense from other organisms. Is that clear, class? Okay, let's proceed to the second. Anybody? Okay, commensalism. What is commensalism? It is a relationship where one organism benefits while the other is neither helped nor harmed. Okay, who can give me an example of commensalism? Very good. An example of a species having this type of relationship is the epiphytes. These are plants that grow on other plants such as trees. They gain support from their host plant without affecting it. Commensalism. Okay, another example. Okay, very good. It is the relationship between remoras and sharks. As the remoras attach themselves on the shark, they get to transport to different places and feed on the leftovers of their host, while the shark does not benefit nor is harmed. Another example is cattle egrets eat insects disturbed by grazing livestock. Birds trail army ants to eat fleeing insects. Very good. Okay, what is the third? Very good. Again, parasitism. What is parasitism? Parasitism is a relationship between organisms of different species where one species benefits while the other is harmed. The organism that benefits in the relationship is called the parasite, while the organism that could harm is the host. Parasitism may occur outside or inside the host body. When a parasite lives inside the host body, such as the case of hookworm inside the body of human being, so yung tinatawag natin na mga bulate sa ating tiyan, ang tawag po doon, the relationship is called endoparasitism. On the contrary, when a parasite lives outside the host body, such as the case of the ticks on the fur of the dogs, the relationship is called ectoparasitism. So, yung mga kato na nasa mga aso, ang tawag doon sa interaction na yon ay ectoparasitism. Is that clear, class? Okay, let's proceed to non-symbiotic relationships. So, unlike symbiotic relationships where organisms live together, non-symbiotic relationships do not allow different species to live harmoniously within the same habitat. In these relationships, different species struggle for survival. So, there are two types. We have the competition. Okay, competition is species have similar niches. Aside from having similar niches, the resources needed by both species are in limited supply. The populations compete with each other for the limited resources. Competition may occur among species of the same population. So, this is called intra-specific competitions, while interspecific competition occurs among organisms belonging to different species. We have the two types of competition. The number one is the contest competition. So, ano ba yung contest competition na yan? It involves an active physical confrontation between two organisms. One wins. So, what are the example? Two dogs fighting over a bone. One may have stronger muscles and sharper teeth, and so win the bone. Another example is the two stags fighting over mating rights. Okay, competition has two types. We have the interspecific competition. So, when two organisms of different species compete. So, we have the example, the owls and the hawks who eat mice. If each animal runs out of other food sources, they will compete for food. So, this could result in some animals not having enough food to survive. So, maaari silang mamatay. And it could also lead to fights between these animals. Okay, what are the second? We have the intra-specific competition. Members of the same species compete for food, mates, nesting site, space, and water. So, we have the example, the wolves fighting for meat. The alpha male will eat first. Okay. Number 2 of the competition is what we call the predation. Ano ba yung tinatawag natin na predation? Anybody? Okay, predation. Where one organism benefits by killing the other organisms. So, the organism that benefit is the predator, while the prey is the organism that is killed. Okay. Now that you are through with the lesson, try to group yourself into 3 and answer the following and see for yourself how much you learn. I will give you 5 minutes to answer this task number 2. Time's up! Let us check your work. Who would like to answer number 1? Okay. Number 1. Please read. All of the following are symbiotic relationship, except A. Mutualism, B. Competition, letter C. Commensalism, and letter D. Parasitism. What is your answer? Very good. It is letter B. Okay, number 2. In this kind of relationship, one organism benefits while the other is not affected. What it is? A. Parasitism, B. Mutualism, C. Competition, and letter D. Commensalism. Okay, that is correct. Letter D. Oh, what about number 3? Who would like to answer? Okay, number 3. Wolves and lions may occupy the same trophic level because letter A, they both eat herbivores. B, they live on land. Letter C, they are large animals. And letter D, they are predators. What is the answer? Okay, letter D. Predators. They are both predators. Okay, let us count your correct answer. Who among you got 3? Okay. 2. And 1? Okay, thank you class. I'm glad that all of you get a perfect score. Lastly, kindly copy your assignment. So please get your journal and notebook or portfolio and write your personal insights about the lesson using the prompts below. Okay, I understand that blank, I realize that blank, and I need to learn more about blank.
I understand that living and non-living things interact with one another. I realize that the living and non-living components of the environment must be protected and conserved to keep Earth's resources sustainable and to maintain the balance of nature. I need to learn more about the ecosystem and the relationship and roles in an ecosystem.
That's all for today, class. And before we end our lesson, I want you to think about this. You cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make. Thank you and God bless us all. Bye for now. See you tomorrow.